shida ni hii chat, mbona hii chat ikuji? Hello. Can you hear me? Shida ni venye sijui kunini hiyo, lakini mimi ndo wacha nichape hii 2000 nikigojea saa yake atanisaidia hiyo maneno. Tuashe LBC kidogo.
This time of year, we know you're snowed under. But with Halford's biggest ever Black Friday sale, you handle the shopping, we'll handle the saving. Grab up to 50% off our motoring and cycling must-haves, including tools, in-car tech, bikes and more. Whether it's Christmas gifts, everyday essentials, or just an excuse to treat yourself, we've got you covered. Pop to your local Halfords today or shop online. Offer subject to availability, full T's and C's and exclusions apply. See halfords.com for details.
Leading Britain's conversation. Tom Swarbrick. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
5:18 the time. He sold his soul. He sold out a nation. Nathan Gill, the former leader of Reform UK and Wales, jailed for 10.5 years for making pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament for cash. And what cash at the end of the day? Several thousands of pounds, maybe? Tens of thousands of pounds, maybe? I listened to the sentencing remarks from Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb, and I noted that Nathan Gill has children. He's a father. Imagine that. Imagine your dad has taken cash from an enemy to advocate for their interests as an elected official in a supranational parliament. Imagine the shame of that. It is appalling. And if Sir Bill Browder is correct, and he knows these things pretty well, this is happening quite a lot. And I wonder whether it gives you pause for thought. In this case, in this political party in particular, given it is one of their people who has been found to have done this, whether or not you feel Reform has a Russia problem. Alex is in Lewisham. Alex.
Hi, Tom. Yes is the answer to your question. I do believe Reform have a Russia problem. And as Bill Browder also said, it's other parties as well, but let's start where our antenna pointers first. It's so obvious that Reform UK have a Russia problem. The lines that Gill was spouting, we've heard other people in Reform spout repeatedly since the start of the Ukraine war, since before that. If you go into the history of certain individuals' comments and their entire history of their relationship with Russia, it's so blatantly obvious. And I really just can't stand the double standard. If this was Keir Starmer, it would be all over every single newspaper, leading LBC every hour. Yeah, well, but why isn't it when it's Nigel Farage?
Well, hang on. Nigel Farage has not been found guilty of any crime, let alone...
Sorry, Nigel Farage's party.
Let alone a crime of this nature. If it turns out that a Prime Minister in the future was taking money to act on the Russians' behalf, I think it would obviously bring the government down. So that would be a mega story. You're talking about it on the radio now because we are covering it now, because it is a big story, because 10.5 years in prison for a crime of this nature is incredibly serious.
Yeah, sorry, what I meant was Nigel Farage's party and his long-established links with different parties of that colour. All I'm saying is that there's so much circumstantial evidence out there that links people from that particular orbit, and if you look at the global MAGA movement as well, there's so much evidence, albeit circumstantial, but at least now we have solid legal evidence with the Nathan Gill case. There's so much circumstantial evidence. I'm just curious as to why the media isn't, and I'm not talking about you necessarily, I'm talking about all the people that work for the Telegraph and they're not putting all of their effort into digging deeper into this like they did with Angela Rayner's house.
Yes, we have to be quite careful here, Alex, not to libel anybody. But what would that circumstantial evidence to you be?
You mean the stuff that I've read? I mean, just anybody should go and read anything by Carol Cadwallader. from the last decade, if you want a starting point. There's people like Dave Troy. There's so many people out there that I can't and I won't list them all. But there's people, anybody who's really interested in this stuff.
Well, doesn't the argument go something like, and I'm obviously paraphrasing and dumbing it down, but the argument goes something like, Brexit was a very bad decision for the country, they say. It's a decision that the Russians would approve of, they say. Brexit was pushed by these people, they say, therefore they were pushing the Russians' interests.
Well, I mean, Brexit is just one facet of it all. Brexit is just one thing. I mean, if you look at the migrant crisis, I mentioned this to you the other day. There are significant articles in right-wing magazine newspapers, The Spectator, The Telegraph, telling us that Putin is pushing the migrant crisis onto Western Europe. It's there and nobody talks about it. So who would benefit Vladimir Putin the most to be in power in this country? Is the question I just want everybody to ask. If you base it on things that have been said and things that have been done and this decision today, who would benefit Vladimir Putin the most?
And you see that as something that now, given what has been aired publicly about this particular leader of reform, you think that should be a genuine consideration for people before they go into the voting booth?
Well, given what we heard earlier on this week about Russia parking their ships on our lawn, so to speak, given the army generals saying we are very close to war with Russia, I think it should be a massive consideration for people.
Alex, I appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Owen's in Northern Ireland. Owen.
I think this is a laugh. Every country in the world spies on each other. Recently it was discovered that America had spies in the EU.
Oh, of course, yeah.
If we have spies in Russia. I'm quite sure we've spies in Iran. I'm quite sure we've spies in North Korea and Korea. And you're going on about, Russia's doing this and China's doing that. We're all at it. Catch yourselves on, you're talking nonsense.
Well, I don't think it's nonsense,
It is nonsense, of course it's nonsense.
What do you mean?
You're going on about other people spying on us when we're the bloody same thing.
Well, Owen, normally those people who are doing the spying or the advocating for the interests of that particular country are the people who are paid to do that, are the spies. In this case, an elected British member of the European Parliament is being paid to advocate the interests of the Russians.
Yes, and the Americans were spying in the European Parliament.
But America has its spies.
I don't know who the Americans were paying. Do you know who were the Americans paying?
Well, America has its spies. We have our spies. The Chinese have their spies.
Yes.
They are acting in the interests of Britain, America and China. In this case,
they're being paid by somebody.
Of course they are. They're being paid by the state.
Well, who do you go on about this, then? Your conversation's ridiculous.
Do you not think it is of note, surprise and some form of disgust that an elected British member of the European Parliament is acting on the interests of the Russians?
Of course I do. But it's only because he was caught on. There's tons of people at it.
Right, and is that is obviously a bad thing, Owen, no?
Well, I mean, the British press aren't doing anything about it.
Well, that's maybe, but it is a bad thing that British members of in this case, the British members...
Of course it is.
Okay, so...
I've never said anything different. I'm just saying they're all at it.
Who's all? Who's they?
Well, every country in the world practically has spies in some other country. America has spies here, I'm quite sure. America knows what's going on in the British government more than we do, I bet you.
Well, they have their spies, yes. But
of course they do. Yeah, but you're admitting it then.
Of course they do. We all know that. But this is rather different, isn't it? This is not a paid spy of the Russian state who's been turned over. This is a British elected official who has taken bribes to act in the Russian state's interest.
Yeah, and I've said that's wrong. But it's only because he's been caught. We're doing exactly the same. We're paying people in Russia, we're paying people in China, we're paying people I'm probably we're paying people in America to try and find Mr. Trump and so too. You know, it's all
they're acting they are doing it in order to advance Britain's interests. This reform politician was doing it in order to advance Russia's interests.
Advance British interests, advance American interests a famous way, invade another country to advance somebody's interests.
Okay. Owen, appreciate it. Thank you. 03456060973. If you are a Reform supporter, voter, councillor, I wonder how you react to this. 5:27 business update now. Chris Justin is here from 7 Investment Management. My God, it's the final weekend before the budget, Chris. You're going to be deep in financial memes, but pressure is growing on the Chancellor as the government borrows more than expected.
British stocks £8.4 billion in October, Tom. And then the package for the fiscal year is at £9.9 billion, more than forecast by the OBR in the spring. And this is relevant because obviously in phrase next week, as you mentioned, the challenge is broader.
Chris, I don't know what's happened to the line to 7 Investment Management. It sort of seems like we're going back in time. We'll try and get you on a better line. It is the weekend before the budget. There's going to be, I suspect, in some of the Sunday papers, perhaps, rampant further speculation as to what Rachel Reeves is going to announce in the budget. You have, I think, seen her in the papers, in the pages of one of the papers today, saying that she has been chronically underestimated her entire life, that she's sick of being mansplained to on various issues, including probably the economy, and she's going to deliver for the British people. What's she going to deliver? Well, tax increases, yes. Borrowing, potentially. But she's attempted to do her bits to reassure markets who have been made very jittery by what they see as a change of course between lining people up for having the income tax rise go ahead and then withdrawing that as a possibility, perhaps because of political considerations, but also, I would have thought, because of the considerations that the OBR said that they've got a bit more money to play with. We'll find Chris on a better line in a few moments. Jeff, is it working? Jeff?
Hello, Tom. I don't think this politician, formerly of Reform, has a particular empathy with Russia. I think he has an empathy with obtaining large amounts of dishonest money.
So it's a money issue. If it were the Iranians or whoever, or the Chinese,
Japanese, anybody had approached him and offered him thousands of pounds for secrets, he would have come up with them.
Well, he doesn't have any secrets. Do you know?
Well, whatever it was, whatever he was doing, passing on information or writing letters or whatever. And the same with any of these politicians that get involved in this sort of thing. We've had it with the Chinese people.
For sure.
I think it's the money that does it. It's the money. I don't think they're particularly, enamoured with Russian politics or Chinese politics. No. It's just the money.
Transactional.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wonder, Jeff, whether it, to some extent, will colour people's opinions about, in this case, Reform UK now. Will there forever be a bit of a question hanging over them about links to Russia because of this?
I think there will, Tom. I think, because he was a member of Reform, it will tarnish the whole Reform party or all its politicians. I think that's the way it's going to be. The same as anybody from any party.
Do you think that's fair?
Not really, no. Obviously, it's not the whole of the Reform Party that are colluding with the Russians, but it's just one or two.
How about two? Jeff, appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. 03456060973, the number. Coming up.
No more spending on fidget spinners or art from the Tate to save the government £25 million. I'm LBC's Natasha Clark with the exclusive story.
5:30. News headlines on LBC. Amelia Cox.
President Zelensky has vowed not to betray Ukraine's interests over a US-backed peace plan which would see it give up territory to Russia. He has appealed to Ukrainians for unity as he faces pressure from the White House to agree to the deal which endorses key Russian demands. Reform UK says the actions of one of its former politicians are treasonous and unforgivable after he accepted pro-Russian bribes. Nathan Gill made favourable statements in the European Parliament in exchange for cash and has been jailed for 10.5 years. A former mayor of Liverpool has pleaded not guilty to charges of bribery and misconduct. Joe Anderson is alleged to have sent or arranged to have sent threatening letters to himself. LBC weather becoming breezy tonight with rain spreading eastwards, rain clearing to showers in the northwest later, a low of -5 degrees.
This is LBC. Waitrose presents
I really fancy a mince pie.
one man's selfless journey from sofa to kitchen.
I'm getting up.
For a #1 golden mince pie with juicy golden raisins, cherries and apricots, and zesty limoncello.
With some cream.
Run for a #1 golden mince pie with juicy golden raisins, cherries and apricots, zesty limoncello, and a dollop of fresh cream.
Limoncello.
Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores subject to availability.
For people living with dementia, Christmas can be confusing, overwhelming, heartbreaking. Families are often left to cope alone. But you can help a family reimagine Christmas. Donate to Alzheimer's Society and you can help provide practical support, expert advice and crucial companionship this Christmas. It will take a society to beat dementia, and we can't do it without you. Search Alzheimer's Society and donate today.
So, what's on your to-do list today? Why don't you check if you're eligible for pension credit? It tops up your pension income and also opens up help with heating bills, council tax and more. Search pension credit on gov.uk or call 0800 99 1234. There's nothing to lose. Check today. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
Welcome on board this LNER service from London King's Cross to Edinburgh. My name's Paul, your train manager today, and hang on, is that a Scrabble tournament in coach here? Yes, G with an X is a word. Right, we're cruising at 125 miles per hour, same speed this lad next to me is typing. Someone's on a roll. The cafe bar's in coach G if you fancy a brew, or if you're mid-box set binge, just order through the QR code of your seat. We'll deliver it. So sit back and enjoy your journey. With LNER, it's freedom all the way.
Thomas Walbury. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
5:33 the time. Simon Marks here with his American Week in 10 minutes. We'll speak to Natasha Clark about a very interesting story about what exactly is going on the government credit card. Chris Justin is here for attempt 2 from 7 Investment Management about the borrowing of Rachel Reeves. Chris.
Yeah, for a moment I thought we were going to go into the weekend without being able to reference the bond market or the budget. I mean, which would have been a terrible outcome. No, the government borrowed £17.4 billion in October. Now that's taking the total for the fiscal year to £9.9 billion, more than forecast by the OBR in the spring. And the reason obviously this is relevant is because it frames next week's budget challenge very, very well indeed. And that is that Rachel Reeves' headroom against her fiscal rules, certainly self-imposed fiscal rules, have all but gone. But also we got a slew of data out today as well, which none of it's pretty rosy. Apologies, I'm not going to be a ray of sunshine for you today, because retail sales data that was released today was weaker than expected. UK consumer confidence was down. I don't think anyone would be overly surprised at that, given everything that's going on at the moment. But service sector activity as well, which is a really good forward-looking indicator as to what might be going on with economic growth in the months to come. It's the biggest contributor to our economy after all. It's about 70 or 80%, that sector of our economy hit a 7-month low as well. So look, I don't sell these things because I'm a glutton for punishment, but the Chancellor is going to have to raise taxes to establish fiscal credibility after all the rumours last week that she was going to be binning the original idea of raising income tax. It was enough to raise bond yields, one of the larger rises we'd seen in the day. So the bond market is nervous from that point of view. So fiscal credibility is key, but it's at a time when growth signals are pretty awful indeed. So it's a hell of a tough balancing act that she's going to face.
What we're going to hear next Wednesday is that balancing act. What we'll hear next Friday on the programme, Chris, is the investment session where you and Ben will be able to tell people, or at least offer some suggestions as to where they might find the information to guide them to where their money might grow.
Exactly right, because there are still opportunities out there, there are still sectors that are doing well, and also we have to remember that in the face of inflation being stubbornly high, you cannot leave your cash in a bank account wallowing away and eroding in value. You've got to get up and do something about it. So absolutely, we'll dive into it next Friday.
It's Get Up and Go from Chris Justin from 7 Investment Management. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Natasha Clark will join us in a moment. You won't believe what's going on the government's credit card. Frida's in Coventry first. You want to come back to Nathan Gill? Frida, hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Am I on the radio?
Madam, you are on LBC, speaking to the nation. They are leaning in, ready to hear your words.
Well, if they are listening, I would really appreciate it if they would take note. I asked your research to check, and this chap who's just been in court from Wales regarding spying for the Russians was in the EU at the same time as Nigel Farage, who's also an MEP. I think that's very important because prior to this chap being arrested, Nigel Farage was saying what good friends they were and how long they'd been friends.
I think this man was taking bribes rather than spying. I know it's a sort of difference that might not make much importance, but it is, he was taking bribes, he wasn't spying as such. But you're right, Nigel Farage has maintained that he didn't have a clue what this guy was up to. He's absolutely shocked by it. It's all appalling.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he?
enough question mark? Or were you, Frida, always of the view that maybe there was something going on? You're not a particular Farage fan?
I'm not a Farage fan, but it's got nothing to do with assuming anything. I just don't think that he's as British as he could be in terms of, given his track record with the EU and how he carried on over there. I remember him standing up and shouting unpleasant things, just to get on the cameras.
Frida, appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. 5:38 the time. Next.
The cards have an item limit of £20,000 and a monthly limit of £100,000.
Labour have gone all Doge to an extent and cut up the credit cards. Spending on government credit cards has fallen by 25 million in the first 4 months of a government-wide crackdown. So what was going on the never, and by that, of course, I mean your taxes. Natasha Clark is LBC's political editor with the details. Natasha.
Tom, yes, you'll remember in the election campaign, Labour released a whole bunch of data on just how much was being spent on government procurement credit cards. And when they came into power, they promised to put that to bed. I've got an update for you today. Since they launched that crackdown 4 months ago, spending on those government credit cards has gone down by a huge £25 million. That's 6 million-ish a month. The government say they've cut the number of people who are using these cards domestically down from around 7,000 to 2,000. There's around 20,000 of them in circulation. Of course, that includes some using them overseas through the Foreign Office too. The government have also revealed some more of the bonkers things that they were being used to pay for, including the prison service spending £9,200 on branded hand sanitizer. The Ministry of Justice paying £4,000 for branded USB cables. Get this, for a virtual conference. Cash was also being splurged on branded jumpers and even £1,450 on fidget spinners. The PM's Chief Secretary Darren Jones told me today that this was right during a cost of living crisis, that waste was being cut.
We know many families across the country are still struggling to make ends meet each month, so it's important that we cut wasteful spending in government as well. That's why we've cancelled nearly 2/3 of credit cards used by domestic civil servants and saved a huge £25 million of spending via those credit cards in the last 4 months alone.
Now, I don't want to be cynical and suggest that money is not being spent elsewhere in government, just not on a government procurement card, of course. But of course, if it helps crack down on waste and helps put that money back into departments, especially if next week we could be looking at tax rises across the spectrum in Rachel Reeves' budget, I think people will welcome a bit more of that.
Purchasing 13 fine art photographs from the Tate, I noticed, Natasha, went on these cards.
Yes, that was right. So I just don't really understand quite why that was even a decision made, because as you know, Tom, the government art collection is there for ministers to use at their whim. They don't have to pay for that. That is art that the government owns that they can pick to put on their walls. And Rishi Sunak's Treasury decided to spend even more money picking out these photographs, we believe, out of the Tate. It really does beg a belief, doesn't it?
There's the government art collection, I'm led to believe, is absolutely enormous and is stored underground and no one will ever see these pictures or no one will ever see these paintings. The light of day will not be shone on them. So to go to other places to buy this art is obviously crazy. But what wonders, Natasha, how on earth these things get signed off? How is a civil servant sitting somewhere saying, yes, this is a good idea, I approve?
Well, I think just the idea that there are 20,000 of these credit cards in circulation means that there clearly was not enough scrutiny going on with what was being signed off. Now, of course, you'll be aware that if you go onto gov.uk, you can look at spending over £500 that every government department has to publish it. Obviously, things under that threshold may not be published. There's just not a lot of scrutiny of these kinds of things, and that's exactly why Labour, when they were in opposition, wanted to shine a light on what they believed at the time was being a widespread misuse of the system. And you're totally right about that artwork. Every time I go into a minister's office, I say, oh, this is a lovely, lovely painting on the wall you've got here, Minister. And they say, yes, I absolutely chose it myself from the government's art collection. Again, it is free. It is not something that we have to pay for. So the idea of paying more money on top of that seemed utterly bizarre.
Natasha, thank you very much indeed. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, with her fidget spinners. Jerry's in Whitney Bay. Jerry. word enemy as such, but certainly a country with whom we have major disagreements.
Well, that brings me on to my next point. We have the government collapsing the trial of 2 spies just for the sake of calling them an enemy. Then we have Beijing Barry Gardner, who actually employed a spy in Parliament and took £600,000. Now, that as a donation to an individual MP, does that not make you think a bit?
Well, I also note that there's a suggestion that ministers should refrain from making, sensitive phone calls in particular types of vehicles, Chinese-made vehicles. I think, why on earth are they buying them to ferry government ministers around if they're worried about any listening devices? Jerry, appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Still to come.
From the G20 summit in South Africa, the world sends a message to President Trump. You've got to be in it to win it. I'm Simon Marks. American Week is next.
5:43. News headlines. Amelia Cox.
President Zelensky has told Ukrainians he is facing the heaviest pressure yet to accept a US-backed peace plan which would give in to Russian demands. Reform UK's former leader in Wales has been jailed for 10.5 years for accepting pro-Russian bribes. And it's understood the government is set to approve plans for a new Chinese super embassy in London. LBC weather becoming breezy tonight with rain spreading eastwards, rain clearing to showers in the northwest later, a low of -5 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh. Expect delays on the M25 anti-clockwise. Traffic is being held temporarily after junction 25 for Enfield to recover a broken down car. There are delays on the M11 northbound towards junction 7 for Harlow as the exit slip road is closed to clear a spillage of oil. It's heavy on the M4 westbound from junction 7 at Slough West to 8 at Maidenhead as the lane is closed for emergency repairs. In Battersea, Battersea Park Road is partially blocked both ways because of an accident between Chesney Street and Alexandra Avenue. In Chessington, it's slow on the A243 Leatherhead Road both ways at the Malden Rushet Crossroads because of the roadworks.
Sunday with Lewis Goodall.
Again, I think that the pre-budget period has been, again, pretty damaging for Starmer and for Rachel Reeves. If Reeves had gone ahead with an increase of income tax and thereby broken the Labour manifesto pledge, whatever sort of neat trick you tried to pull off, cute trick you tried to pull off with NI, I think it would have been politically catastrophic for her. I think it would have been damaging for politics itself because you shouldn't make those sorts of promises if you're not absolutely sure that you're going to make them.
Sunday with Lewis Goodall. Sunday morning from 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £132 million. It's so exciting, I could do the splits. Whoa. Oh, should have stretched first. Get in tonight's Euro Millions draw. Play on app.
Estimated jackpot. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Call Tom Swarbrick 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Join Andre Rieu at OVO Arena, Wembley, London on 18th of September. Book now at andrerieu.com.
Welcome on board this LNER service from London King's Cross to Edinburgh. My name's Paul, your train manager today, and hang on, is that a Scrabble tournament in coach here? Yes, G with an X is a word. Right, we're cruising at 125 miles per hour, same speed this lad next to me is typing. Someone's on a roll. The cafe bar's in coach G if you fancy a brew, or if you're mid-box set binge, just order through the QR code on your seat. We'll deliver it. So sit back and enjoy your journey. With LNER, it's freedom all the way.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. HolidayParkAdviceCentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Have you ever wondered what a sandwich sounds like? Not much to it, is there? Unless, of course, it's a Walker's sandwich. That is good. Now that's what a sarnie should sound like. Go all crisp in with Walker's. Delicious.
How's the business going? We're busier than ever, but struggling to get the staff we need. Recruiting can be such a distraction. We gave Job Centre Plus a try, and they've really helped us out. Really? Yeah, it was dead easy. We got our own employer advisor, Julie, who helped advertise our jobs, shortlisted candidates for us, and let us Jazz interview at the Job Centre. We've hired some great people, and Job Centre Plus really took the hassle out of it, and there was no fee. Brilliant. That's straight on my to-do list.
Find out more at business.gov.uk/recruits. Eligibility criteria apply.
Waitrose presents. And the main event. One cook learns that love doesn't always shout. You know, for me, sometimes it whispers.
You saved your best bit, Dad.
Starring succulent #1 free-range turkey bauble, wrapped in dry cured beechwood smoked bacon, with cranberry jeweled pork stuffing and orange glaze. Thanks.
Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Subject to availability and delivery slots available to order online and in stores from 19th of December.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
10 to 6, Friday evening, Tom Swarbrick here on LBC means, as you know, one thing. He's racking up the air miles by jetting hither, thither and yon, with many left wondering why he can't clean up the mess in his own country. From South Africa, alongside the Prime Minister, it's Simon Marks, American Week.
Tom, good evening from Johannesburg, where this weekend the G20 summit will be taking place. The Prime Minister arrived here this morning, but President Donald Trump did not, nor did Vice President J.D. Vance, whose assignment to attend the summit on behalf of the United States was upended just 2 weeks ago. Then, in an unprecedented fit of pique, his boss, the President, decided that nobody from his administration should attend this G20. So a total US government boycott is underway because, and I am not making this up, President Trump continues to believe that there is an unreported genocide taking place against whites in South Africa, even though there is not, and insists that Afrikaners are having their farms expropriated by the government without compensation under a new law here, even though that also has never happened. Here he is, doubling down as recently as Tuesday.
I'm going to South Africa for the G20 because I think their policies on the extermination of people are unacceptable, because South Africa has behaved extremely badly.
Of course, the South African government does not, in fact, have a policy of exterminating its own people, despite what President Trump said there. We are in a world of make-believe now, and we've reached the point where the G20 hosts this year have decided to send a very clear message to Washington and to other governments, ours included, that it's time to stand up to President Trump.
We will have a declaration. The talks are going extremely well. I'm confident we are moving towards a declaration.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday pushing back after the Trump administration, which, let me remind you, is completely boycotting this G20 summit, nonetheless warned him not even to think about brokering a joint declaration with other world leaders by the end of the weekend. President Ramaphosa here reminding Donald Trump that you've got to be in it to win it.
We are now just dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Well, without the United States, the whole process of the G20 is moving forward.
You will not be bullied.
We will not agree to be bullied. Thank you.
South Africa has come to the conclusion that for the next 3 years at least, it now has nothing to lose. Since January, Trump has incinerated the bilateral relationship between Washington and Pretoria. He hectored and lectured President Ramaphosa during the South African leader's visit to the White House in May. He has taken exception to the fact that Pretoria secured a war crimes indictment against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the International Court of Justice. And bizarrely, the only refugees the United States is now accepting are white Afrikaners, for whom America's doors remain wide open. Little wonder that the country's Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola, this week in an interview with CNN, went so far as to accuse the American president of being a white supremacist.
You think Trump is pursuing a white supremacist agenda?
Yes, I think so. With the program to take the white Afrikaners from South Africa, it's a clear program to back up the issue of white supremacy. And when you look at the Geneva Convention, they don't fit the definition of a refugee.
Here in Johannesburg, China is now moving in and occupying the void left in America's wake. Their cars are selling like hotcakes across South Africa. The Chinese delegation is coming to the G20 bearing millions of dollars in developmental assistance to begin making up for the shutdown of the US Agency for International Development. Until Elon Musk ordered it closed earlier this year, it was the biggest provider of humanitarian assistance for the entire African continent. The mood here, lost it, and it's time to stop pretending that you can find a way of navigating relations with a loopy US leader. Unless, of course, you are Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
I believe, Mr. President, today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment.
On Tuesday, the man the CIA accuses of personally authorizing the 2018 murder and dismemberment of Saudi-American journalist Jamal Khashoggi was welcomed to the White House by an American president who could not have been more forming and defensive of his very controversial guest.
Now you're saying to me now that the $600 billion will be $1 trillion.
Definitely.
I like that very much. I want to just tell you what an honor it is to be your friend, and I very much appreciate the investment. Now, $1 trillion, okay?
And when highly respected reporter Mary Bruce, the White House correspondent for ABC News, asks perfectly reasonable and legitimate questions of both President Trump and his Saudi guest, well, you can be the judge.
Is it appropriate, Mr. President, for your family to be doing business in Saudi Arabia while you're president? Is that a conflict of interest? And Your Royal Highness, the U.S. intelligence concluded that you orchestrated the brutal murder of a journalist. 9/11 families are furious that you are here in the Oval Office. Why should Americans trust you? And the same to you, Mr. President.
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business.
Now, let's just pause briefly to note that this was also the week when the president demeaned another female reporter, Catherine Lucy of Bloomberg, telling her to be quiet piggy when she asked a question he didn't like. His White House press corps is now swelled with propagandists working for right-wing channels and streaming outlets that are entirely supportive of him. And the more they throw softballs at him, the angrier he becomes when the occasional legitimate reporter manages to break through. Referring to Jamal Khashoggi, who remember was a US citizen brutally murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul after writing articles the Crown Prince didn't like, President Trump disgracefully went on to sully his memory and repudiate the findings of US intelligence agencies.
You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen, but he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
It's just he asked, Mr. President, you allow me to answer. About the journalists, it's really painful to hear anyone that been losing his life for no real purpose or not in a legal way, and it's been painful for us in Saudi Arabia. We've did all the right steps and we've improved our system to be sure that nothing happened like that, and it's painful and it's a huge mistake, and we are doing our best that this doesn't happen again.
Bit uncomfortable that for President Trump. Unlike US intelligence, he says Mohammed bin Salman had nothing to do with the chopping into pieces of Mr. Khashoggi. But the Crown Prince himself then said it was all a big mistake and he's taken steps to make sure it can never happen again. Talk about mixed messaging. Yesterday, President Trump himself appeared to endorse acts of political violence against his opponents. In a posting on social media, he described his Democratic Party critics as seditionists who should be charged with treason. And he approvingly reposted another message calling for them to be hanged. For those of you who have spent the last week on the dark side of the moon, you will be stunned to discover that since my last epistle, the president has engaged in a complete U-turn on the subject of Jeffrey Epstein. I know, just a week ago, he was desperately trying to persuade some of his fellow Republicans to abandon their support for the release to the public of all files relating to the deceased sex trafficking financier. For reasons that remained deeply obscure, he was moving heaven and earth to make sure that the documents remained under lock and key. But then, with a screech of tires and the realization that his effort wasn't working, the U-turn.
So, I'm for I don't. They can do whatever they want.
The president telling Republicans, go ahead, vote for the release of the documents. But there were caveats.
We'll give them everything, but don't talk about it too much because honestly, it's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends, all of them. And it's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax.
Now, just to clarify, in case you're confused, it's all a hoax, except for the bits that refer to the Democrats. All the stuff about former President Bill Clinton and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who this week emulated Peter Mandelson's fall from grace, all of that stuff you can believe. Attorney General is going to make sure that you never see any document that incriminates her boss, the President.
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
You could drive a truck through the holes in that statement, as she indicated moments later, when suddenly she started talking rather unconvincingly about some new information that might actually prevent her from releasing the files.
Information that has come for there's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Maximum transparency, eh? We'll believe it when we see it, and many members of President Trump's Make America Great Again faithful aren't buying it for a second. They still think, with some justification, that a massive White House cover-up is still firmly underway. Well, this weekend, the Prime Minister will be here at the vast Nasrec Expo Centre on the outskirts of Johannesburg, with one big question for him ahead. Will he support the South African President's efforts to deny President Trump the right to condition the outcome of a summit from which the US leader has withdrawn? Or will he risk a breach in his personal relationship with the American President, Tom, by backing a summit declaration that is anathema to the White House?
From Johannesburg, Simon Marks, American Week. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. In the next 60 minutes...
We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion.
Breaking news in the last few moments. A member of the BBC's board has resigned over governance issues at the top of the corporation. We'll bring you the details. Also...
We are doubling the number of households who will have access to the Warm Homes Discount Scheme.
Energy bills are set to rise again in January, despite forecasts the prices would fall. Ofgem blaming government policies. Is this a net zero tax? And
men need relationships more than women. Widows are happier after their husband dies. Widowers are less happy after their wife dies.
The academic and entrepreneur Scott Galloway, who is a New York Times bestseller on his notes on how to be a man. His view is that toxic masculinity doesn't exist. Is that true?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, President Zelensky has warned Ukrainians it faces losing a key ally over a US-backed peace plan with Russia. It's understood it includes giving up territory and limiting the size of Kyiv's military. Reports suggest the White House wants President Zelensky to agree to it and is threatening to cut off intelligence and weapons if it doesn't. Sir Keir Starmer says it must be the right deal for the Ukrainians.
We all want a just and lasting peace. That's what the President of America wants. That's what we all want. And so we need to work from where we are to that end. But the principle that Ukraine must determine its future under its sovereignty is a fundamental principle.
The government is calling for reform to investigate whether there is any Russian influence within the party. Its former leader in Wales has been jailed for 10.5 years for accepting pro-Russian bribes. Nathan Gill made favourable statements in the European Parliament while a member in 2018 and 2019. Anti-corruption campaigner Bill Browder has told LBC he thinks his sentence is too lenient.
I think the sentence is too short. What this individual did is truly, I think it goes well beyond bribery. He was working for an enemy, a country that is an enemy to the United Kingdom. Russia is an enemy. We need to make an example out of these people because he's not the only one. This is the tip of an iceberg. I suspect there's many others who have not yet been caught who are doing the same thing.
Reform says Gill's actions are treasonous and unforgivable. It's understood the government is set to approve plans for a new Chinese super embassy in the heart of London. Concerns have been raised that it could become a centre for espionage with its location close to the Tower of London and above data cables. Security services have reportedly cleared the proposals, with China claiming spying accusations are pure fabrication. 2 teenagers have denied carrying out a cyber attack on Transport for London. Prosecutors say it resulted in a £39 million loss in September last year. They're due back in court in February. And Premier League clubs have voted in favour of a new financial fair play system
suicides will be men. Well, and we spoke earlier this week with Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, about this men's health strategy, but I had really wanted to speak to the academic and entrepreneur Scott Galloway, who's written a New York Times bestseller called Notes on Being a Man. He's also, I don't know whether it's my algorithm or you seeing this too, he also seems to be all over social media, saying things like this.
I think about trying to raise good men. A lot of that is real motivation to just be really good to their mother. And I try to go out of my way to just be very supportive of her, be very loving, be very affectionate, talk her up, give her her own stages where she can get applause, because Dad gets so many applause on different stages. Because I think if you want your sons to have healthy relationships, one of the fastest blue line paths to making sure that they can achieve what I think is the most rewarding thing, and that is to partner with someone and have kids. The upward spiral is to develop a practice of it just being really kind and generous. And I'm doing a lot of virtue signaling now, but I do try and practice it. Just be really good to their mom.
I didn't put the music underneath, that was social media's fault. He's a dad of boys himself. There is a real problem here, particularly among young men. Suicide rates, loneliness rates, rates of violent crime. It's a bit of a young man's game. Part of it, as you'll hear, I think, is that perhaps young men are being told, and what do we mean by young? I'm not quite sure, but let's go with young men are being told that they are by definition toxic, that they are automatically seen as a threat to women because they are a man. That this notion of toxic masculinity has now been seized on by characters on the right like Tate, and who is using them to tell young men that women hate them and to that extent are therefore some degree the enemy. Scott Galloway's approach is to say that toxic masculinity doesn't exist and that what young men need is a code for how to be.
I think every young person would benefit or benefits from a code, and that is a framework for helping them make the myriad of decisions they're faced with every day. You can get that code from your family, your religion, the military, even from work. And I think a lot of young men are searching for a code. And I'm trying to fashion a more aspirational vision of masculinity that might serve as a default code for young men in terms of helping guide them in setting sort of an aspirational framework. And I relate to young men, especially struggling young men. I was one of them. And I just don't think there's any denying that our young men are struggling. So I felt there was an opportunity to discuss the issue.
And I guess the question then is, why are young men in particular needing a code?
Well, the data is pretty overwhelming. If you go into a morgue and there's 5 people who died by suicide, 4 are men. And there's 1 in 7 men are now qualified as NEETs. They're neither in employment, education, or training. Only 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 is Young men specifically seem to be really struggling with finding purpose and meaning.
Let's talk about where that purpose and meaning might come from. You've mentioned work, you've mentioned relationships, and by that I guess we mean kind of sexual, romantic relationships, but also friendships. I mean, I just think about my own life and whether or not I have a best friend in the way that my wife has a best friend, or the way in which I would interact with my friends. Perhaps I'm not a young man anymore, but the way in which I would interact with my friends differently to the way my wife interacts with her friends.
Well, women tend to have kind of more relational EQ or IQ. They tend to be better at friends than men. And oftentimes, when a woman doesn't have a romantic relationship, she'll pour that additional energy into her friends or her work. If a man hasn't cohabitated or been married by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he'll be a substance abuser. There's this cartoon of women in their 30s who haven't found romantic love, sitting in their windowsill, depressed, living with cats. It's a bit of a cartoon, because that woman is actually, for the most part, I'm not suggesting that loneliness is not upsetting for women, but generally speaking, that woman is fine. It's men. Most of the research shows that men need relationships more than women. So, for example, widows are happier after their husband dies. Widowers are less happy after their wife dies. women do live longer in relationships, 2 to 4 years, men 4 to 7 years. So it ends up that men actually benefit more from relationships than women. And also women are better, quite frankly, they're just better at friends than men.
But if the young man can't find a way to get into a relationship because the woman who is of the same age is looking for an older man who has more financial means, who perhaps has better understanding of themselves, of the world, then they're going to struggle.
Women are ascending globally, and by the way, we should do nothing to get in the way of that. I think it actually helps men, doesn't hurt them. And the far right, to their credit, saw the problem with young men before anyone else. The issue is around the remedy, and that is they think the answer is to take women and non-whites back to the 50s. I don't think that's the answer, but you do see, I don't even think it's that necessarily women want older men. What they want is just more economically and emotionally viable men who tend to be older. So it's created a bit of a disconnect where fewer and fewer young people are pairing up.
So it's purpose, it's providing, being the provider, and it's to a certain degree it's procreation, isn't it, if we're honest?
I think a young man's desire to have relationships and sex has been demonized or pathologized, and I think we should celebrate it, because for the most part, it motivates men to be better men, to dress better. Oh, I think that in a lot of instances, if a man makes an approach and expresses romantic or sexual interest in a woman, that if it's not warmly received, it's seen as borderline toxic. I think men have received mixed signals around approaching women and expressing interest both at work and outside of work.
The idea that because there is male violence towards women, that every man is a threat, or at least has to prove himself not a threat before given the time of day?
There's a lot of stories about a young man makes an approach in a social situation, it doesn't go well, and now he's that guy, and maybe it ends up that they work at the same big company, and so I think we've just decided that, quite frankly, a lot of young men who express romantic or sexual interest are by default predators. And what you're hearing more and more recently is that women will say they go out to environments and venues where it's obvious they're open to meeting people, and they're no longer getting approached by men. 45% of men 18 to 24 have never asked a woman out in person. So I do think that a lot of young men have developed an understandable reticence to approach women, and also, to be blunt, some of them are opting out because they find the frictionless near facsimile of sex in the form of synthetic lifelike porn as a low-friction option that reduces, quite frankly, their courage or their risk-taking to try and meet women in the real world.
You talked there about toxicity. You said, quite famously, that you don't think toxic masculinity exists. That's caused people to be very, very angry with you.
Yeah, I think there's cruelty. I think there's abuse of power. I think there's violence. I don't think there's toxic femininity. I think femininity and masculinity, these are social constructs that we can fill with whatever associations we want. But I'd like to think that masculinity is protection, kindness, and so I think to conflate masculinity, which I believe, if framed correctly, is a wonderful thing, should ever be conflated with toxicity. I just don't.
So what is being described in the phrase, do you think, toxic masculinity? You think poor behaviour by men, repulsive behaviour by men?
If you're the wealthiest man in the world and you're cutting aid to HIV-positive mothers, that couldn't be any less masculine. If you're being sued concurrently by two women for sole custody of that child because you've never seen that child, and again, you're the wealthiest man in the world, that could not be less masculine. And what worries me is that a lot of the men that people would naturally look up to as role models for masculinity, or should be able to look up to, whether it's the most powerful person in the world, the president, or the wealthiest man in the world, Elon Musk, I think they demonstrate a lot of behavior that would be described as anti-masculine, not toxic masculinity. So I'd like to think of masculinity as a positive aspirational thing, and that toxic and masculinity are oxymorons.
One of the things you say, which I'll end on finally, you've talked about some very successful people Of course, success doesn't come without a lot of failure. You say nobody is paying as much attention to your failures as you are, so fear them, but don't let them paralyze you. When you do fail, don't feel you need to excuse your failures or blame others. Being gracious in victory is admirable. What's harder but can pay greater dividends is being gracious in failure. Shame and fear of embarrassment often hold people back from leading a better life. How would you ensure that a young person, a young man listening to this, doesn't feel that shame or embarrassment in failure?
It's just for more people like yourself to acknowledge and tell the stories of how the only thing you can expect across people who are very successful, very happy, score above their weight class economically and romantically is that they heard the word no a disproportionate number of times. The only way you get to wonderful yeses is by taking risks and being willing to endure rejection, pick up, and move on. And that is, I believe, if I could wrap my arms around all young men who are struggling right now, the message I would want to communicate is that sequestering from other people, spending time online and on a screen, the ultimate fear and anxiety and loneliness you will feel will far outweigh any of the fear represented by the things that lay outside of that room for you. You need to get outside. You need to take risks. You need to express friendship. You need to apply for jobs you're not qualified for. You need to approach people and express romantic interest while making them feel safe. And if you get a no from a job, if you get a no from an investor, if you get a no from a potential romantic partner, you're both going to be fine. And the only thing successful people have in common was before they got to great yeses, there were a ton of no's. Get out, get rejected, learn from it, develop calluses, develop strength and skills such that you can get to wonderful yeses.
The academic and entrepreneur, Scott Galloway, his book, a New York Times bestseller called Notes on Being a Man. You're a man, a young man, listening to that. I wonder what you make of his notes. Get out there, go and meet people, go and fail. That is the fastest way to success. Now, the criticism is easy for him to say. He's a multi-millionaire. That's, if you keep getting no and you don't get the yeses, then you're in trouble. I wonder what you made of his description of toxic masculinity, that it isn't a thing, really. It's what we call it. There is toxic behaviour, but that's not because the person is a man that they are behaving in a toxic fashion. And this idea that 45% of 18 to 24-year-olds have never asked a woman out in person, I wonder whether that is because you fear being labelled as that guy or somehow a threat because you offered some gentle interest in a person that you fancied. If you're a woman hearing this, what do you make of the criticisms, such as they are, of being a young man, of it being so difficult to be a young man? 03456060973. Tom Swarbrick on LBC at 6:17.
LBC.
A message from TFO.
I saw him in the local news a few days after. His name's Rakesh. They had to put him into a coma just because I didn't look again at that turning. He had 2 kids. How did I not see his bike ahead of me? Well, I didn't look again. He didn't make it.
Drivers, take another look, not a life. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This year, Amazon are increasing the electric delivery vehicles we use across Europe to 10,000. It's a difference you'll notice on your doorstep, where babies are made a fuss of. Where we deliver footballs for kids' kickabouts, and where they deliver the football straight into next door's garden. Can they have their ball back, please? We're delivering change where it matters, on your doorstep. Delivery service partner vehicles across the UK and EU.
This could be the best Christmas ever. Christmas Cash Call is here with a life-changing £200,000 to be won. Enter this week's draw before 5 p.m. next Friday and you could get a call with £200,000. Christmas Cash Call. Text radio to 82200 to enter now. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network charge. 18 plus, UK only, global network competition. Full rules and free entry at christmascashcall.com.
Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
6:19 the time. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC, bringing you some more details in a few moments on the breaking news this evening that a board board member of the BBC has resigned over what he says are, quote, governance issues. At the top of the corporation, this is Schmidt Banerjee has said in a letter that he was not consulted about the events leading up to the departures of the Director General Tim Davie and the BBC News Chief Executive Deborah Tennant. We'll bring you more details on the resignation of that particular BBC board member in a moment. I want to talk about your energy bill because unexpectedly, certainly according to market watchers, it is going up in January. And it is partly as a result of the decisions the government has made about some net zero policy, so we'll get into the details of that as well. But we've just spent some time there hearing from a man who's becoming increasingly important and inspirational for some amongst young men, mainly via social media, but of course through his best-selling books, the most recent being Notes on Being a Man, tapping into a sense that, I don't know whether you share, whether you are a parent of young men, that it is harder today to be a young man than it has been previously. We had Wes Streeting, the health secretary, on earlier this week saying much the same thing. It is just much, much tougher to be a young man now than, quotes, before. What does that mean? By tough, do they mean the economic circumstances are not in your favour when you're young? So being able to build a life for yourself by having a career and getting a job and getting that stability financially is much, much harder, because it is. But then why would that apply only to men? Of course it doesn't, it applies to women as well. Is it the environment in which men are being brought up that this notion of masculinity as being toxic stops them from expressing the thoughts or doing the actions that they as men would want to do? Well, that kind of lumps all men in together as being behaving in one way, which they don't. But when it comes to, as Scott pointed out, approaching members of the opposite sex and expressing an interest, 45% of 18 to 24-year-olds have not asked a woman out in person. Perhaps because it's easier not to, because there's so much more technology that exists in order to be able to do that. But maybe out of a sense of fear of rejection, but also a sense of fear of being labelled as toxic for expressing a romantic interest in a woman that doesn't happen at that point to be particularly well reciprocated. Is that toxic masculinity? When you hear this phrase, or you are someone as a woman, you are someone as a woman that sees that all the time. You see it all the time in the way that a man might look at you on the train, a way a man might behave around you in public. I've referenced to you, I talked about it earlier this week, the incident with my wife at the weekend where she was spat at in her face by a random man. Because she, I think, was probably judged to be a woman alone in the car and therefore an easy target for this man. I wouldn't personally say that was toxic masculinity. I would say that was criminal behaviour by a man that needs to be punished. But I don't know that it's the masculinity bit that's toxic. The other example that people often give is a kind of, let's imagine a stereotypical guy, beer drinking, football liking young man, going out with his mates of a Friday evening. If that man sings a particular football chant, 10 German bombers in the air, I think is often referenced, that is also a form of toxic masculinity. That is an unacceptable way for that young man to behave. Nigel Farage was asked about this not that long ago and said that it is wrong to criticise those young men who do that. That you've got to let young men be men. Is that what being a man is to you? Being able to express those kind of thoughts, being able to have that, quotes, kind of fun, even if it is at the expense of others, even if it is referencing events a long time ago. To be honest with you, I just have no issue with that. Singing that chant, I just don't see it's a football chant. It doesn't mean anything. They're not talking badly about every German person. It's a song, it's meant to be funny, whilst also recognising the efforts of the RAF during the Second World War. I don't see how it is toxic, let alone toxic masculinity at all. 0345 6060 973. If you are bringing up, well, I am too, but if you are bringing up a young boy, do you fear that they are going to become toxic because they are male? That the environment is teaching them to behave in a way that you don't like, and you're finding it difficult to get them out of that because 1 in 3 under 25-year-olds live at home, because 1 in 5 under 30s live at home in a way that they just didn't before, and that is eating away at their sense of being masculine because they can't get out from under mum's apron strings. Joe's in Collierswood. Hi, Joe.
Tom.
Hello, sir.
100% 100% agree with your guest. I listen to LBC quite a lot. I don't think you've ever had a guest that I agreed as much as I have with that guy. And I'm definitely going to read his book.
In what way?
Well, I'm 35 years old, sort of still in the data market, but I also have 4 younger brothers who are in their 20s, early 20s, some mid-20s and late 20s. But the point is, I find the whole environment for men or young boys very, very challenging these days in order to attract women, approach women, every way you look at. I mean, if you're an attractive young girl in your early 20s, you're definitely not going to date someone your age, because you're going to date up because you're looking for someone who has that nice car, nice job, they have a house, and you're much more likely to date men in their 30s. And I'm telling you this from experience. I just feel so sorry for guys in their 20s, late teens coming up. They're just not going to approach girls. And this thing about toxic masculinity, I don't believe there's such a thing. But because it's not universally defined, if you go to a person and say, what's defined toxic masculinity, they couldn't probably tell you. You'll get a different definition from everyone. So what happens is that if a young lady or a girl doesn't like something from a guy, or it's the wrong type of guy, or they don't like the guy, as soon as they get that kind of approach, they can define that in their own head as toxic masculinity. And that's a big problem, is we don't have a universal definition. I'm sure there are guys that are still living in the 60s and 70s and who believe a woman belongs in a kitchen, all that, traditional things that people talk about all the time. But that's not what 95% of men believe in. And so if they even try to be masculine, and the problem you have now is a lot of girls complain because they don't get approached by men. And you're like, well, why would they? Because if you don't like them, you're just going to label them with all sorts of things. So why would they even take that risk?
That even approaching a woman to express some sort of romantic interest could be seen as toxic, and therefore something to be scared of as the man wanting to do that.
Yeah, it's almost this unwritten rule. Now, when I used to go out in my early 20s, back then there was no dating apps. So if you couldn't approach a girl at a bar or whatever, then you were toast, right? But because it's so easy nowadays, it's almost like the expectation is, well, if I'm single, I'm going to be on a dating app. Why are you approaching me? But that only applies if the girl doesn't like the guy. If she obviously likes the guy, she would say, oh, that's good, that's a good approach, and you get a win-win. But if the girl doesn't like it, and I think what I would say to guys is they need to be a lot better at reading body language and making sure that there are some signals that the girl wants them to approach them before they actually just take the risk on anyone and everyone.
Do you think, Joe, that the narrative is being put out there that because men have committed crimes and appalling violence on women, that therefore all men are potentially a threat? And the man's job to women is to show them very, very early on, and how I don't know, that they are just not a threat. And if that means literally not going near a woman in person because you're, any kind of a romantic approach might be seen as threatening, then that doesn't happen. Is that what is happening among 20-year-olds?
Exactly that, Tom. It's such an unfair starting point. And the other thing you're going to see on a lot of dating apps, you'll see girls say, change my mind about men. It's like they went through some experience with another guy in the past. In their head, every man is the same. It's like, no, we're all different. So, you starting from a minus position is very, very difficult. It's almost like you have to prove that you're not guilty of all these different things.
I mean, it's hopefully it's funny rather than worrying. But I used to present the late night show here, and I'd walk out of this building at about 1:10 in the morning, and there's very few people around. Particularly during COVID, there was almost nobody around. And I was walking through a particularly poorly lit street in the middle of the night, and there was a woman in front of me, or walking several paces in front of me, and my footsteps were kind of echoing off the buildings around it, and I was very aware of the fact that there is a woman up ahead in the dead of night with the echoing footsteps of what sounds like a person with a big gate, so probably therefore a man, behind them. And I was trying, do I stop and
cross the road? You went the other side.
Yes, I crossed the road and went the other side, but of course the footsteps kept carrying on. So Joe, do you know what I did?
your head when you walk in the dark with another young lady.
But isn't that good?
On the same page.
That pops into someone's head. That's a sign that there is an understanding here that, of course, women are going to feel threatened if they're out on their own at night, and there's a possibility that someone that wishes to do them harm is hanging around, and more likely it's going to be a man.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to have different types of men. We're not all the same, as I keep saying. You and I can think that way, but that doesn't mean every young man out there can think that way. So therefore, they shouldn't be labelled unless they've already committed a crime and done something previously. It's just unfair for them to have to prove themselves. And like I say, socially, young men are not the same as what they were like when I was growing up in my late teens and 20s. I think the millennial generation was like the last one. Like Gen Z are socially not to the same level. So when you throw all these other little barriers, you're just making it so difficult for them to go and talk to girls and go into dating and marriage and all that kind of stuff.
Joe, listen, we're about the same age. I'm a little bit older than you, but we're in the same ballpark. And I wonder whether every generation says it, but man alive, I'm so glad that I had my teenage years as they were when they were, without the rampaging hell that social media can bring with it, and the isolation that it can cause. Yes, it can be very good. Yes, it can be wonderful. But Joe, appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. 03456060973. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. After the news,
I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. Not that they couldn't have not done that.
with issues between the BBC and Donald Trump, we learned tonight that a member of the BBC's board has resigned over governance issues at the top of the corporation. We'll look at why after this. 6:31 now, headlines, Amelia Cox.
Sir Keir Starmer says Ukraine must determine its future after speaking to Volodymyr Zelensky about a US-backed peace plan. It's understood Washington is pushing the Ukrainian president to agree to it, but would include giving up territory and shrinking its military. Reform UK says the actions of a former politician jailed for accepting pro-Russian bribes are unforgivable. Nathan Gill was sentenced to 10.5 years for making favourable statements in the European Parliament in exchange for cash. And a BBC board member has stepped down over what he claims are governance issues at the top of the corporation. Shamit Banerjee says he was not consulted about the events which led to the resignation of its Director General and Head of News. LBC weather becoming breezy tonight with rain spreading eastwards, rain clearing to showers in the northwest later, a low of -5 degrees.
This is LBC.
How's the business going? We're busier than ever, but struggling to get the staff we need. Recruiting can be such a distraction. We gave Job Centre Plus a try, and they've really helped us out. Really? Yeah, it was dead easy. We got our own employer advisor, Julie, who helped advertise our jobs, shortlisted candidates for us, and let us interview at the Job Centre. We've hired some great people, and Job Centre Plus really took the hassle out of it, and there was no fee. Brilliant. That's straight on my to-do list.
Find out more at business.gov.uk/recruit. Eligibility criteria apply.
At Lidl, we won't be beaten on price on a range of Christmas mains. Like our Birchwood fresh British medium whole turkey, smoked gammon joint and more. All at an unbeatable price. Lidl, more to value.
Selected products on sale from 27th of the 11th and 19th of the 12th and price match in most major UK supermarkets until 24th of the 12th. See lidl.co.uk/LBTV while stocks last, exclusions apply.
Do you ever feel like getting back under your duvet in the middle of the day? Ferroglobin is a great tasting liquid formula with iron which contributes to the reduction of tiredness and fatigue and normal formation of hemoglobin. Ferroglobin from Vitabiotics at Boots, pharmacies and vitabiotics.com.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £132 million. It's so exciting, I could do the splits. Whoa. Oh, should have stretched first. Get in tonight's Euro Millions draw. Play on app.
Estimated jackpot. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Leading Britain's conversation, Tom Swarbrick. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
6:34 the time. Tom Swarbrick on LBC. I'm going to be allowed to live this one down. I just thought that. I mean, how unthreatening is that? I kind of got to hope that the woman in front of me knew what it was, but nevertheless, I thought that was the right thing to do. This is Sunday tea time, and this can't be a bad thing. Let me read this from Jane. Tom, this subject is so important. I'm a mum of 2 now young adult men. I love men, work with many men, mum of them, married to one. I love maleness, but society is trying to measure them as female. At sixth form, lots of PHSE lessons are about toxic men, how they're all a threat. It is ridiculous. My boys are lovely gentlemen who will always walk their female friends home. Occasionally they get it wrong and say stupid things, but so do us girls. Give them a break and celebrate maleness. Celebrate maleness. What does that maleness mean? 03456060973. Kenna, I'll come to your call in just a few moments. First,
net zero is very, very expensive, and ultimately that cost is going to be borne by the British people.
The energy price cap will rise by 0.2% from January the 1st for a typical household in England, Scotland and Wales, according to Ofgem. It's an unanticipated increase, coming after households had been expected to learn that their energy bills will actually come down in January. Rather, the opposite seems to be happening. Caroline Bragg is CEO of the Association for Decentralised Energy. Thanks for coming on, Caroline. It doesn't seem that the reason for this rise is because actually energy prices wholesale have gone up, but rather it's as a result of some of the net zero policies that the government is instituting and paying for things like nuclear power plants.
Yes, that's right. So as you say, we had expected it to come down, but paying for Sizewell C, one of the new nuclear power plants that we're looking to build, as well as some other small changes, have meant actually it stayed basically about the same. The big thing, though, is that the same analysts who are widely respected in terms of what might happen in the future are now expecting bills to rise by about £75 in April.
Do you think it has been well explained to bill payers that the reason their bills are going up is to fund things like greening the electricity grid by 2030?
Well, I think there's an enormous debate to have, and obviously this comes a few days, really, before the budget, where it is rumoured that the Chancellor is going to significantly cut bills, particularly by moving some of these policy costs perhaps onto taxation and making other changes. I think the real thing here that we've got to bear in mind, firstly, there's been all manner of rumours about what's going to happen, what the Chancellor is going to do to get bills down. First thing is we can't afford another green crap moment. From this government as we had, sort of 10, 15 years ago. That cost us pretty dearly. The second thing is that we're still faffing about. We're wasting kind of domestic renewables when we could be using them. We need a system that actually puts money back into customers' pockets rather than consistently putting up bills.
Do you think then it has been a mistake to tag on to an electricity or energy bill the cost of greening net zero policies? Should it come from taxation?
I think so. I think when we've seen, for example, Germany has already made the move. It's significantly more progressive than what we've got, and it would help us to decarbonise our heating, which is still subject to considerable international volatility.
Is it right? I see that the funding includes the government's Sizewell C nuclear project around £1 per month, which will be. Is that again? Is that right to tag it onto electricity and energy bills because people are really struggling with those now?
So what we'll see probably is if they make a move on in the budget, that will include things like nuclear. But we're going to have to see what happens at the budget next week.
When do you think these prices might start to go down? I'm old enough to remember Ed Miliband saying you'll get 300 quid off your energy bill by the end of the Parliament.
Well, I think one of the really important things that we need to see, this government needs to set out a really clear plan that is not sort of faffing around the edges, particularly because we're going to be paying huge amounts for new network over the next few years. What we need is a system that actually rewards customers for the flexibility and the changes to their energy use that they can make, and therefore that probably can get you about £150 off your energy bills over the next 5 to 10 years.
Let us see. Caroline, thank you very much indeed. Caroline Bragg is CEO of the Association for Decentralised Energy. How happy are you to learn that the reason why your energy bills are going up is because you're paying for net zero? Decisions made by the government, political decisions by the government to get to greening the electricity grid in particular by 2030. No one forced them to do it. It's not a bit of legislation specifically that they have to hit. It is a decision they have made to do it. They say it will benefit us in the long run, but of course your bill goes up in the meantime. Happy with that? Agree to that? Get on with it and pay it? Or have that money, rather than come off your bill, maybe come out of taxes, which will end up going up anyway. 03456060973. Here's Caroline on 84850. Tom, the definition of masculinity, having qualities or an appearance traditionally associated with men or boys. How is that toxic? It's not. It's being conflated with misogyny, which doesn't make any sense. plenty of very non-masculine looking men who hate women, says Caroline. Kemma, I promise I'm going to come to your call in just a few moments. I did want to bring you up to speed with breaking news from the BBC this evening.
I'd be very surprised if the President ever got a significant payment out of the BBC. I don't think it would be appropriate, really, for the BBC to pay public money to the President of the United States.
A member of the BBC's board has resigned tonight over what he says are governance issues at the top of the corporation. Fraser Knight is LBC's reporter with the details. Fraser.
Yeah, Tom, more chaos at the top of the BBC this evening. Another resignation, of course, at a difficult time for the corporation. Donald Trump threatening to sue over the way a Panorama documentary about him was edited. And tonight, Sumit Banerjee has reportedly hit out at the governance issues as he resigned from the board. He's said to have said in a letter that he was not consulted about the events that led up to the Director General Tim Davie and the BBC News boss Deborah Turness announcing their resignations earlier this month. And he, of course, this comes at a time when we have seen that dossier which claimed that the Panorama documentary completely misled viewers in the way it had spliced together segments of Donald Trump's speech. Now, of course, the BBC has apologised to the President, but is refusing to pay compensation. Lots of concerns have been raised by some people about how the BBC board is operating. The chair, Samir Shah, has been criticised by Sumit Banerjee in this resignation, we're told, along with other members of the board as well. So he is not going quietly. And next week, we're expecting members of the board to be hauled before MPs to answer questions too around allegations of systemic issues, including around the coverage of Israel and Gaza's conflict and the issues of sex and gender. A BBC spokesperson telling us tonight, though, that Sumit Banerjee's term on the board was due to end at the end of December anyway, and they say the search for a replacement is already well underway.
Fraser Knight, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed with the details of the latest comings and goings at New Broadcasting House. I noticed that some of the members of the BBC board up in front of MPs on Monday afternoon. We'll wait and see. Kemma's in Kennington. Hi, Kemma.
Hello. I found myself increasingly frustrated listening to some of the calls, but the chap who wrote the book and he had a lot to say. A lot of what he said made sense to me. However, at the end he said something that I found was a bit wrong, to be kind, suggesting that masculinity and toxicity is an oxymoron, which that seems ludicrous to me. There is such a thing as poisonous water, and is that an oxymoron? Basically, I think a lot of the conversation is about masculinity being bad, which is, in my opinion, a nonsense. However, some aspects of masculinity are bad, and that is what we see a lot of reported in a lot of reports all over the place, and that is a problem. But the suggestion that one of the callers was talking about men can't approach women because if a woman doesn't like him, that becomes toxic masculinity and all this sorts of stuff. It's just...
So what kind of masculinity is good? The kind of masculinity that's good is the one that provides, protects, reassures, supports, loves, and does things like, personally, I have no problem with it, but as a young man going to a game of football, letting your hair down a bit and singing a song about 10 German bombers, it doesn't bother me particularly.
I agree. However, most of what you said, I could say the same about any parent.
Of course, yeah.
So, but in as much as what is positive, I couldn't answer that but because I would say masculinity in general is positive. However, there'll be things within it that can be dangerous, or if it goes taken to excess, can be bad. And the most obvious one is violence. Men singing at a football match and that laddie behaviour of singing songs and jumping up and down and pouring your beer, and that's fun. I'm a man, I know how that feels, it's great. However, if there's someone amongst that group or on the peripheries of that group who might be feel intimidated or might get bundled around a bit, then they might feel uncomfortable. That doesn't make it toxic.
Yes, I guess, look, people might say that your description of fun, jumping up and down, swilling the beer around, chucking it about, singing songs at the football, that is perhaps part of the problem, they might say. That your expression of your maleness is, quote, problematic because it's chest beating and loud and stereotypical.
see, you raise a good point there, because how someone behaves in the case where my behaviour as a man doesn't have any direct impact on anyone outside of my group of men, then how they take my behaviour is their business. Yes. However, if my behaviour is directly affecting someone, then it becomes my issue that I'm responsible for.
I was at a football match, and I take my son to the football most often, so I'm not getting really stuck in. But I was at a football match, and there was a bloke a couple of rows in front, and there was a song going around, and people were singing this song. It wasn't rude at all, there were no rude words in it, and this man turned around and he told everyone to be quiet. And I kind of thought, you are in the wrong place if you think that this is somewhere where groups of men are going to be quiet.
Yes, absolutely. And one could argue it's quite masculine of him to stand up to X amount of events. But one important thing, one of the callers mentioned about men potentially being dangerous, and because a woman's had a bad experience once and she treats all men the same and all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of men, I'm 56, I've got 3 sisters and loads of female friends, and I was in my 50s when it dawned on me that if I were to go to a bus stop at night and there's a woman on her own at the bus stop, in my head I'm thinking, whatever could have happened when she was on her own won't happen now because I'm here. And if any man were to try and be rude to her or anything, I'm here and I would step in. Even though, she's a stranger, I'm not trying to be like the hero or anything, but there's no way I could stand there and allow something like that to happen.
Are you mansplaining, Cameron? Why can't the woman take care of herself?
No. What I'm saying is, we are all guilty of that. I'm sure. But
is that not a bit of a? So you take on the protector role because you're the man. No. There's an MMA fighter standing at the bus stop next to you.
No. I disagree. I take on the role because I'm a concerned citizen. If anyone is potentially at risk and I'm there, my ego wouldn't allow me to walk away from that. I would have to do something, even if it's just call the police or whatever it might be.
Cameron, I really appreciate the call. Great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. 03456060973. There's Cameron ready to protect you at the bus stop, ladies. Is that's good? That's good masculinity, no? Or is that somehow patronising? You can handle it yourself. You're trained in jiu-jitsu. 03456060973. 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Rachel Johnson.
Should Zelensky sign on the dotted line for peace in our time? Plus, is Chancellor Rachel Reeves really a victim of misogyny and mansplaining?
Rachel Johnson at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app.
At Laithwaite's, we go to great lengths to bring you great wine. We go far and wide. Searching high, and we mean really high, and low, and we mean stored deep underground in a cave low. Off the shelf? We don't go there. Off the beaten track? We certainly go there. And the best bit is, we even come to you. Order now at laithwaites.co.uk. Laithwaites. We stop at nothing to bring you great wine.
How's the business going? We're busier than ever, but struggling to get the staff we need. Recruiting can be such a distraction. We gave Job Centre Plus a try, and they've really helped us out. Really? Yeah, it was dead easy. We got our own employer advisor, Julie, who helped advertise our jobs, shortlisted candidates for us, and let us interview at the Job Centre. We've hired some great people, and Job Centre Plus really took the hassle out of it, and there was no fee. Brilliant. That's straight on my to-do list.
Find out more at business.gov.uk/recruit. Eligibility criteria apply.
Train to Cambridge and then all aboard the paddleboards. A little bit different, should be fun. Or wobbly, or wet.
The wetsuit's a good look on you, Steve.
Oh, actually, this is very relaxed.
George is up the River Cam without a paddle.
Train home, that was such a laugh. I think I might even have a new hobby. Download the Thameslink Railway app to book tickets and save a third off group travel on off-peak journeys. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
6:49 the time. Peter, I'll get to your call in just a few moments. Here's Lee from Stockport. Tom, that book that you were referencing with the author, Notes on Being a Man, is out of touch boomerism. It reads more like an autobiography rather than anything in-depth and significant. The book overlooks broader structural factors affecting men and instead leans heavily on personal responsibility for solutions. Yeah, but isn't that also quite important? Isn't it also quite important for people to take responsibility for finding the solutions to the problems that they are faced with. And to Scott Galloway's point, that there has been a diminishing of that level of responsibility, which has stripped men, potentially, in this case men, of the confidence to go and try. They're not even bothering to try now because failure is too appalling and they're not resilient enough to deal with the failure. And maybe the lesson is a fair one to say to the 19-year-old, you've got to go out there and fail. Like that, you are never going to have an unbroken boulevard of green lights in your life. It just doesn't work like that. You're going to have to be told no lots of times, and it's going to be very disappointing in various areas of your life. But it's definitely better to do that than not to try. Or is that the argument from people who have had relative success or objective success, who have had the money, have had the romantic success, whatever it may be, and it's very easy for them to say that? 03456060973. Let's come back to your energy bills. Kaz is in St Albans. It's going up, Kaz, in part to pay for net zero. You must be delighted.
No, I'm horrified and mortified.
Why?
We're not even in the top 10 when it comes to greenhouse emissions in the world, as far as countries are concerned. Why on earth are we paying so much for our bills?
Because we are going quicker than other countries in greening the electricity grid, all that involves, including an upgrade to the grid of some £60 billion, and it's got to be paid for somehow.
Yeah, it's got to be paid for, and there's people out there who aren't turning their heating on because they can't afford to pay the bills.
Correct.
It's disgusting.
Do you think, though, it has to be paid for at this rate, at this speed?
I don't think it should be paid at all. I think we should just stick to our energies the way that we are.
You don't think there's any suggestion that it would be a good idea, and because it would be cheaper in the first instance, to go greener?
Well, no, because it's clearly not cheaper. We're paying more when we're making less emissions than China.
But it's not
India.
cheaper now because we're not cheaper now because we're in that transition period, aren't we? We're in the period of having to build the infrastructure to be able to get to the bit where it is cheaper.
Yeah, you could argue that. So, are you for electric batteries, electric vehicles?
I've got one.
As it's more greener.
Oh yeah, I've got one. It's honestly, it's amazing. It is absolutely rapid. This thing. It's like you put your foot on the accelerator, and it's like you're about to take off in a plane. It's amazing.
I suggest you watch a documentary on how lithium ion is mined and how much water is wasted.
Oh sure, I'm very well aware of all of that and all the effect on the tyres.
Not very green, is it?
It's no, I would agree with you. In the making of it isn't. But overall, in the life of the car, it might be greener because it's not emitting particulates. Or many more particulates.
Because all the damage is done before it's been produced.
So don't bother with that either?
No. Stick to petrol and diesel like how the rest of the world is.
So the argument that sticking to petrol and diesel and rinsing the fossil fuel stuff is damaging the planet, you don't... Do you follow that? Or you're not interested in that argument?
It's like we're in a room, you're drinking a quarter of a pint, and there's others guzzling 3-4 pints, and you're telling me by drinking a quarter of a pint, you're going to make a difference to the barrel. You're not.
But if the quarter of the pint was doing damage to me and possibly to lots of other people, would you not switch drink?
Is it more of a priority to stop the people that are guzzling 2, 3, 4 pints at a time?
Yeah, but you can't stop them. They're loving it. They're back up and down from the bar. They've got loads.
We're buying everything from them. Maybe
am I buying my half from them? Or am I going to the bar?
Well, I mean, in theory, it's a bar. In reality, we're buying stuff from China, India, USA.
We're merely offshoring our carbon by buying it from places that are ending up making it. But China, to be fair, is doing quite a lot in greening their economy too. They're one of the biggest makers of electric cars. I see them driving around all the time these days. Kaz, thank you very much indeed for the call. Peter's in Harringay. Peter.
Yeah. I mean, that man who thought he needed to protect women at bus stops, I mean, that could backfire a bit. And also, women, if he was at a bus stop, they'd straight away be thinking of me as a possible threat. Bus stop. But anyway, about me, I went to a concert, about this suspicion, seen as a threat. I went to a concert, and the concert was pretty full, so I was watching the concert along the bar. I could see the concert at the end of the bar. I was taking photos and video. But halfway through, security took me to one side and sort of it's crazy.
So is this? Are we at the stage of having to do the proving of your non-threatening nature prior to doing anything, or do you have to show yourself to be innocent before someone? Do you know what I mean?
You can't do that, because obviously someone is going to see you as a possible threat and they report it. Whatever they say is taken as gospel. You can't do anything about it, because, I mean, the people, the security, as they escorted me out, I tried to discuss it with them, but they weren't interested. I was at the door to be kicked out, and they weren't looking at my phone when I saw video, and that was it. They just got me out of the venue. But, I'm an old geezer anyway. I'm not a young person, so it's not like I would be trying on with a young person.
Yeah. As a committed old geezer, there are lots of them about. I wonder what you make of the suggestion that it is just much, much harder these days to be a young man.
I think probably is. I mean, I'm not a young person, but I think probably is. And obviously they have to be very careful at what they do,
And because they have to be more careful, that's what makes it more difficult?
Well, I think if women have got suspicious, much more suspicious now, then they have to be careful about what they do around them, I think.
Would you now, if you were walking down a street at night and you saw a woman in front of you, would you now think that she might be concerned that there is a man behind her on a dark road in the middle of the night, and therefore you need to show somehow that you are not a threat, either by crossing over the road or whistling the Antiques Roadshow theme tune?
Oh yeah, well, I think that's just normal now. I think women, that's a normal part of women's behaviour now, being in defence mode at some time, which is fair enough. And I think most men would be.
Isn't it our fault? I say our fault. It's not my fault, but isn't that the fault of, quotes, men?
Well, I don't think it is. I think it's just that it's possibly an overreaction by women, but it's understandable in its own way, because they want to protect themselves, so they're going to probably overreact and keep away from people that they think might threaten at night or when they're vulnerable. Which
I assume has always been the case. Has it not always been the case that if you're on a street late at night in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that as a woman you were pretty worried, and therefore now the need for men to show that there is no threat is a good thing, even if people rail against the notion that they are therefore considered toxic males as a result. Here's Paul on WhatsApp. Tom, assuming that this is the first time you've told that story, it is, can you promise your listeners that the next time you go to meet your mates at the pub, you'll be recording it in some format so we can all enjoy the chorus of Antiques Roadshow as you enter the bar? Well, I don't think I'm going... I wish I hadn't told us, actually, so I'm not going to be able to live it down. Thank you very much indeed for your time tonight. Thanks for your time this week as well. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinion, put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Nick Abbott. Next, Rachel Johnson.
Thanks, Tom, and have a lovely weekend. Well, there's a so-called peace plan, and it makes painful reading for President Zelensky's Ukraine. They've defended their country from an unprovoked illegal war for almost 4 years now. Huge swathes of the east must be yielded to Russia. Hordes of the army must be disbanded. Ukraine can never join NATO. Ukraine must hold elections. Well, would that be bye-bye Zelensky as well as the Donbass? So, should he sign on the dotted line for peace in our time? Or should Zelensky tell Putin and Trump to shove their peace plan where the sun don't shine? Plus, I'll tell you exactly what I think about the COVID inquiry.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's
Immersive's newsroom at 7 o'clock. President Putin has backed a US plan for ending the war in Ukraine, saying it can form the basis of a final peace settlement. It's understood it would see Kyiv giving up territory and reducing the size of its military. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been addressing his people this afternoon, saying he won't betray their national interests.
This is one of the hardest moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine today is among the heaviest we have ever faced. Currently, Ukraine may be facing an extremely difficult decision, either a loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner.
Sir Keir Starmer says it's fundamental that Ukraine determines its future. A member of the BBC's board has resigned over what he says are governance issues at the top of the corporation. Shumit Banerjee says he wasn't consulted about events which led to its Director General and Head of News quitting. Tim Davie and Deborah Turnus quit over how a Donald Trump speech was edited for a Panorama episode last year. A government minister has told LBC there needs to be an investigation to make sure there are no Russian links within Reform UK. The party's former leader in Wales, Nathan Gill, has been jailed for 10.5 years for taking bribes. He made favourable statements in the European Parliament in exchange for cash while a member of UKIP and the Brexit Party in 2018 and 2019. AI and Online Safety Minister Kanishka Narayan has told LBC it needs to be looked into further.
I think Reform has a major Putin apologist problem. So the big thing I'd say is we need an independent, we need a forensic eye on how wide and deep the rot is.
Who would do that?
Well, I think it is on Nigel Farage and the Reform Party to commission independent, trustworthy and forensic investigation into the systemic possibility of the problem.
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has previously called Gill a bad apple. The government insists it will robustly protect the UK's national interests as it reportedly prepares to approve plans for a new Chinese super embassy. Concerns have been raised over its location close to the City of London and over crucial data cables. It's understood security services have cleared the plans. And JD Wetherspoon is opening its first pub in mainland Europe with plans for a bar at Alicante Airport in Spain. The pub, which will be called the Castel de Santa Barbara, is due to open at the end of January. It will be based in departures to allow British holidaymakers a taste of home before they fly back to the UK. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 12 points at 95.39. The pound buys $1.30 and €1.13. LBC weather becoming breezy tonight with rain spreading eastwards. Rain clearing to showers in the northwest later, a low of -5. Rain pushing across the south and east tomorrow. Skies brightening up with a few scattered showers in the northwest. Turning wet in the southwest later, a high of 11 degrees.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Rachel Johnson.
Good evening. The time is 3 minutes past 7 and you're listening to me, Rachel Johnson, with you till 10 p.m. This cold and frosty Friday evening, we got a very busy show and I hope there is as much sausage as there is sizzle. I do hope so. I do actually think so. Though I say so myself at 9, I'm going to rage against the move to make the menopause a disability. At 8, we're going to respectfully debate whether Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, is the victim of a media hit job fueled by misogyny and mansplaining. But in this hour, as well as hearing in a bit exactly my views about the COVID inquiry which reported today, I want to talk about this peace plan, so-called peace plan that's been cobbled together without Ukraine. And of course, as that country that was invaded almost 4 years ago was not at the table, it's predictably on the menu. The White House is aggressively pressuring Zelensky to sign this plan by Thanksgiving, i.e. next Thursday, or lose the US as an ally. The plan, as I said, makes painful reading for Putin? I mean, you're just saying it out loud. The answer is no, isn't it? Would you then allow a real estate deal to replace summitry and diplomacy? A real estate deal that's moreover been brokered by not a diplomat, but by Steve Witkoff, a developer, and Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, no wonder, before we get to our expert reaction, that Paul Zelensky sounds a bit more worried than usual.
This is one of the hardest moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine today is among the heaviest we've ever faced. Currently, Ukraine may be facing an extremely difficult decision, either a loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either accepting a complicated list of 28 demands or enduring an extremely harsh winter, the harshest yet, with all the risks that follow. A life without freedom, without dignity, without justice, and all while being asked to trust someone who has already attacked us twice.
It's heartbreaking to listen to it, but do you think that Zelensky should throw in the towel? 03456060973. This is the war leader who has said, yes, the war must end. But from Kyiv's perspective, there can be no reward for waging war, and this peace plan rewards the aggressor. Let's get to our guests who are waiting patiently. Francis Dearnley. He's the executive editor at The Telegraph, and he co-hosts the brilliant must-listen podcast, Ukraine, the Latest. Francis, thank you for joining me tonight. It's very, very helpful of you, because I know you will have already done your podcast exactly on this peace plan and whether Zelensky should accept it or not. Does the plan dress up previous Russian demands as a peace proposal?
Well, thank you, Rachel, and thank you for leading on this story. You can't say that history doesn't have a morbid sense of humour, because today is Freedom and Dignity Day in Ukraine, and yet, as you say, this is the most undignified peace proposal plan one can really imagine. It is an insult to the idea of Ukrainian sovereignty, and I would say it's also exceedingly dangerous for the world at large, not least Britain and Europe. Because the other aspects of this plan that we've not talked about yet would mean that there can be no Western troops ever stationed in Ukraine, which would mean that there would be nothing to stop Putin just invading again at some point. And they would not be, as you say, allowed to join NATO ever, which means that you've got Europe's largest country in a pivotal geopolitical placement, not able to determine its own future and to be very, very vulnerable to all the sorts of strategies that we have seen the Russians seek to use to manipulate countries, including our own, over the last few decades. This is an extremely dangerous moment, and I'm quite often asked by people like, oh, what we wouldn't give to see a church today. And I agree with that, but I'd go further. I'd settle for a Chamberlain than this, because an misunderstood thing about Chamberlain is that, yes, appeasement was an utter disaster, and I would argue a shame on this country when we were advocating for it in the early 1930s. But at the very least, Chamberlain was preparing for the worst case scenarios. He was arming, and arming in a very, very serious way that meant that we could fight a war if worst came to the worst. And we're not even doing that. And neither is Europe, which leaves us exceedingly vulnerable to President Trump and to Putin. And what we're seeing here is the carving up not only of Ukraine, including territory that Putin doesn't currently own, but the carving up of Europe's security architecture itself. And so I would say to anybody who's not worried about this, you very much should be.
So the last thing Zelensky should do to achieve peace in our time would be to sign this peace proposal, because it may buy a short period of peace, but it gives Putin the space to rearm, to refuel his coffers, because, of course, part of the peace plan is to lift a lot of sanctions, to bring Russia back into the G8, to readmit Russia into the world community. So it may buy peace for a few years, but it's really buying war again in 5 years' time.
I completely agree. And there's another aspect to this, which is not being commented enough in my opinion, but is actually also extremely serious, which is that as part of this proposal, any war criminals would be never able to be legally prosecuted. So you've got a situation where the most horrific crimes and bloodiest war committed on European soil in the same week that is the anniversary of the Nuremberg trials would never be able to be prosecuted in that manner. And that makes a much more dangerous world, because if people know war criminals, soldiers executing civilians, that it's possible for, as part of a peace plan one day, that you'll never be prosecuted, that you can just go about your business. What kind of future world does that create when there's no consequences of that kind of behaviour? And the irony is here that so much of this seems to be steered in the Trump administration by thinking the real threat is China. We have to pivot away from Europe and go to China. China will be watching this with glee, because they will know now that the West does not have the resolve or the power to maintain the post-war security architecture and legal frameworks that were built back then on literally the sacrifices of our forebears, and that they are basically able to carve up the world as they seek to, and they've been very open about, as long as they are willing to ride it out for long enough. So it's very, very dangerous.
Francis Dearnley, I am very grateful for you setting out the dangers of rewarding aggression and giving an amnesty to an aggressor such as Vladimir Putin. Thank you very much, Francis Dearnley, Executive Editor at The Telegraph, also co-host of Ukraine the Latest. Now, let's get the reaction from Ukraine. Inna Sobzan is an MP. She's part of the Ukrainian Parliament, and she joins us now. Inna, thank you very much, if I may. How has the peace plan gone down in Kyiv?
Well, as you can imagine, it is indeed seen very much as a document for capitulation of Ukraine, and particularly on this day when we are remembering the people who have been killed in 2014, fighting for our right to be with Europe, to determine our own path without Russian intervention. That just sounds so unbelievable that we are here at this point. And one thing that is particularly scary to all of us here is that we see that the Americans are really pushing for that. So it's not just it's not just talks. That there have been several high-level officials coming here to Kyiv. We have seen communications from DC. We have not seen the European engagement in all of that. So it's not just Ukraine that was not engaged in the development of the plan, but also the Europeans altogether have not been informed about that. And the Americans are basically, leveraging Ukraine by suggesting that we might not be getting any American weapon if we do not follow up with this plan that has been presented now. So it's a very tense moment and very critical moment where we do require all of our friends in Europe to help us to withstand this pressure from the Americans.
There are lots of demands within the peace plan. What are the most politically, domestically difficult for President Zelensky even to contemplate?
Well, I think there is in general. So the first statement in the plan is that it respects Ukraine's sovereignty, which is a joke, frankly speaking, because all the other plans are actually interfering with that all the other points of the plan actually interfering with that sovereignty, starting with the statement that Ukraine cannot join NATO. Why would an independent sovereign state not be allowed to choose the alliances it wants to join? It actually even sets up limitations of the sovereignty of the NATO member states, because it says that they should not accept Ukraine, which is again limiting their sovereignty. Then, of course, there are points about the size of the Ukrainian army, which is just scary. It's not like we want to have a big army, but we want to be ready.
To reduce the army by about a third, I see.
Yeah, more, actually, more than that.
More than a third. And what about the elections? I mean, has this strengthened Zelensky in terms of his status within the country, or has it undermined him? If there are elections to be held as part of this peace demand proposal, would he win? Would he survive?
Well, look, the peace plan comes at a very difficult internally difficult moment in Ukrainian politics, because we are in the midst of this big corruption scandal that has been revealed.
By people are saying that it has been proposed at exactly this junction in order because Zelensky is at his weakest now.
Yeah, maybe this could have been one of the explanations. We don't know how it came out to be. Elections are not that big a concern, because the biggest concern is long-term security for Ukraine. And what we're seeing here are preconditions for long-term instability on Ukraine, and that is the most scary part of all of that. And also, of course, interfering with the internal policies regarding education and language, which are there as well. That's also completely unacceptable and wouldn't be acceptable to any other country. So this is overall a very, very scary proposal we have at the table right now.
And what's your prediction as to how Zelensky will react, if he has to react? I know he has said it's a very difficult moment, one of the most difficult moments this country has ever faced. But apparently he's being pressured to sign it by next Thursday. So what happens next in a Southern?
Naona charges zinakuja huku backend.